Hey, Math 3 honors. What's up? This is Sensei. Gonna go ahead and learn. We're gonna learn how to graph y equals cosine of x. We're just gonna graph that. Last time we did y equals sine of x. Look at my last video for that. You can figure out how to do that. And yeah, that's what we're gonna graph. But first, I've been just sitting around this house, because this is 2020 that I'm making this video, and the coronavirus. Just sitting at home, trying not to be bored, kind of just sitting around, trying to figure out what to do. So I've been coming up with some hobbies, and one of my hobbies that I came up with is actually magic. I learned how to do magic. Okay, so. Let me just give you a quick demonstration here. Okay, this is gonna get intense. You ready? Okay, let me get a good view of this here. Let's pull this up a little bit so you can see everything in the camera. Okay, now there's no tricks. No tricks here. Let's see. Okay, do you see this pen? It is a purple pen. Okay, focusing all my power. Bam! Whoa! It's red! Wow! Oh my gosh, that took a lot of energy, but I think I have still enough energy to do another one. Here we go. Focusing on the red pen. Focusing on it. Bam! Oh! Look at that, it turned into a ruler. Wow! Okay. Focus power. Focusing all my... not power, but well, okay, here we go. I'm focusing. Bam! Oh, it turned into a cell phone. How did I do that? No camera tricks here. No camera tricks. That's it. Boop! Oh! I don't even know what that is. What is that? A leprechaun. No, that's a tiger or something. Whoa! Look at that. Focusing power. Bam! Oh! Sweetie's here. Wow! Oh my gosh. Okay. Last one. This is my last trick. Focusing. Bam! Whoa! I'm invisible! Oh my gosh, you can't see me. Look at putting my hands over my eyes. I'm putting my hand over my mouth. Woo! Invisible! Yeah! Okay. We're going to learn how to graph cosine. Y equals cosine of x. Now we're going to do the four representations. We're going to show you with the situation. Again, we're going to use the circle that shows us how to graph y equals cosine of x. Then also we're going to use the table which shows us the graph y equals cosine of x. And then we're going to use an equation, y equals cosine of x. There's the equation right there. We got that. And then we're going to represent with the graph. Okay, but again, before we do all that, so look at, if you guys want to copy that, pause and look at that. You can make your own representations there. And then go ahead and pause and look at that. I just took a piece of paper, divided it into 4 pieces. If you want it to look like that with the x and y axis, this is degrees. Okay? Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to represent y equals cosine of x. We're going to look back at these triangles. Because cosine of x is actually like, we're going to look at this angle right here, 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 this angle right here. Use y equals cosine of x for those angles. Now remember, cosine in SOHCAHTOA is cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So it's going to be this over hypotenuse. Remember, this here was my sine in the unit circle that we're looking at, right? If we're looking at the height, is the opposite. Well, the adjacent's going to be over here, and we're going to use this point to represent it. Okay, so cosine is going to be everything down here, and you can see my x's right here. These are going to be my cosines, and I'll explain how we connect the two in just a second. Okay, but first, before we do this, we have a 30, 60, 90 triangle, 45, 45, 90 triangle. Here's another 30, 60, 90, but we have the 60 down here. Let's talk about the relationships of the angles, okay? So if this is x, okay, if opposite is 30 is x, then my hypotenuse is 2 times x, and then this, my opposite of my 60 is going to be x times the square root of 3. So, but if I'm given my hypotenuse, right, to get the hypotenuse, I multiply by 2 to get the hypotenuse if I'm given this. But if I want to solve for my 30, I divide by 2 and I get this side. Okay, so then let's look at this here. Now, here's my 30, okay? This is what I need though, opposite this. So actually this is going to be my 60. But in order to solve this, we have to figure out what our x is. So let's go ahead to figure out this. What do I do to figure out this side if I'm given the hypotenuse of 1? Remember, we're using the hypotenuse of 1. Yes, to figure out the 30, remember to go here. You divide by 2, so you do 1 divided by 2. And you get 1/2 for this. Now, to figure out this side here, you take your x and you multiply it by the square root of 3. So this is my x side because it's opposite my 30. I take this, I multiply it by the square root of 3 to get this side here. Then I get x equals 1/2 times the square root of 3, which equals square root of 3 over 2. Okay? Now, how does that relate to cosine? Well, now to solve for this side, let's go ahead and say we're solving for this side. Let's say I was solving for x using cosine. And how would I do that? I'd say cosine of 30 equals adjacent x over hypotenuse 1. Right? And we know that in order to solve it, we know that x actually equals the square root of 3 over 2 in this triangle. So we can say cosine of 30 equals square root of 3 over 2 divided by 1. But we know that cosine of 30 is going to equal the length of this side if I have a hypotenuse of 1. Okay? So cosine of 30 is square root of 3 over 2. And we'll get into that. And that's what we just figured out. That's going to help us graph our cosine. Now let's look at this here. Okay, so we have a 45, 45, 90 triangle. If I'm given my 45 or my 45, these are going to be the same. In order to get my hypotenuse, I have to multiply this side by the square root of 2. But in order to get either one of these, I divide by the square root of 2. Okay, so here's my hypotenuse of 1. So to figure out what this is, I take 1 and I divide it by the square root of 2. And that's the length of that side. However, we cannot have square root of 2 in the denominator, so we have to multiply the denominator and the numerator by the square root of 2. 1 times square root of 2 is square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4 or 2. Maybe I should do that. I skipped a step there, so I will go ahead and actually work it out more for you. Square root of 2 over square root of 2. 1 times square root of 2 is square root of 2. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 is square root of 4. What is the square root of 4? 2. That's how I got that. Root 2 over 2. So this is equal to root 2 over 2. So now, finding this side, what is cosine of 45 is equal to adjacent root 2 over 2 over the hypotenuse 1. And root 2 over 2 divided by 1 is just root 2 over 2. And so the cosine of 45 is equal to just root 2 over 2. Because when I divide by 1, that doesn't really matter. So the cosine of 45 is equal to the square root of 2 over 2 if my hypotenuse is 1. Okay, so the square root of 45 is the length of this leg of the triangle. Now this all has to do with the hypotenuse being the square root of 1. Now let's look at our last one. Okay, again, if we're trying to solve for this, this is the opposite as my 30. if I'm given my hypotenuse, if I want to figure out the hypotenuse, I multiply by 2, but if you want to go back to this side, you divide by 2, right, to go over here. So I got to take my hypotenuse, divide by 2. What is 1 divided by 2? 1/2. And again, to figure out the cosine of 60, okay, we can say cosine of 60 is equal to adjacent 1/2 over hypotenuse 1, and 1/2 divided by 1 is just equal to 1/2. So therefore, if the hypotenuse is equal to 1, then the cosine of 60 will always equal that 1/2 right there. Okay, and you can check that out in your calculator. And if you really must prove it, we can also figure out the cosine of 60, right? Cosine of 60, make sure my calculator is in degrees, it is. And we can see it's 0.5, which is equal to 1/2, right? And you could do all these, like cosine of 45. Cosine of 45, it says square root of 2 over 2. Well, what is square root of 2 over 2? Square root of 2 divided by 2 equals, you can see like cosine of 45, is that equal to square root of 2 over 2? Well, right, we can prove it by saying, hey, what's the square root of 2 divided by 2? That equals 0.7071. And then we can say cosine, that's on the calculator, cosine of 45. So we can also do cosine of 45. Sorry, there's a little bit of a glare there, but cosine 45 is also equal to 0.7071. Okay, so, and the same thing will happen with cosine of 30. Okay, so those are all equal. So basically, on your notes, you can write down cosine of 30 is square root of 3 over 2. Cosine of 45 is square root of 2 over 2, and cosine of 60 is 1/2. Okay, so have all those written down in your notes so we can start graphing this thing. Okay, using we just proved that cosine equals that. Now let's get to our 4 representations here. Okay, so the situation, and I'm going to use my unit circle. You can go ahead and print the unit circle again. I've sent it to you, all these copies of the unit circle here. Now, here we go. Let's see. Let's figure out our first. Now, we're trying to graph cosine here. So, our first angle here, this right here is going to be our 30-degree angle. Now, our point on the circle is 1. Do you remember what the radius of the circle is? What is the radius of this circle? Yes, the radius of the circle is equal to 1. So, to figure out the cosine, remember, of this right here, my angle is right here 30. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So, my cosine is going to be here. Now remember, imagine if this, I should have mentioned this before, this is a coordinate plane. This is my x-axis. This is my y-axis. And over here is x positive, y positive, x negative, y negative. Okay, going this way. So in order to go to this place right here, to figure out this point, I need to go over and up. Well, how far over is this point? So in order to figure out this x, we have to solve it by figuring out the cosine of x. So again, we know that if this is 1, and this is my 30, 60, 90 triangle, this is 1, which we did before in our last one, we know that this is going to be, remember, this is the 30, right? I wrote it up here, but it's actually, this is my 30-degree angle, which is this right here. I'll write it down here because I got to keep it on. This is my 45, 60, but my 30-degree angles from here to here. I'm right in the angle measurement right there. So you get confused. This is actually my 30 degrees right here. We know it's like this. Then the length of this is my x root 3, or we solved it. which is the opposite of my 60, it's going to be square root 3 over 2. Right? So imagine if that was my 30, this would be my 60. So this will be square root of 3 over 2. And remember we said that that's what my cosine of 30 is. It's going to be square root of 3 over 2. My cosine of 30 is going to be the length of this right here. So in our table, we can write here cosine of 30 is square root of 3 over 2. So remember, the cosine is going to be this distance right here. So now this right here is my 45-degree angle. So since I can't write it up here, I'm going to write it right here, 45 degrees. I just turn this 45 degrees. Now if we drew our line down here for this one, so this is my 45, 45, 90 triangle. I'm looking at this length right here for my 45, 45, 90. Now, what did we solve for this length right here for my 45, 45, 90? It was this right here. We said it was the square root of 2 over 2. Okay, so the length of this on my 45, 45, 90 is square root of 2 over 2. So the cosine of 45 right here will be square root of 2 over 2. Now my next angle after my 30, 45, now this is going to be rotated up 60 degrees. Let's make a little triangle out of that. Now remember the 60 degrees is going to be down here. I just don't have room to put it, so I put it up there. Now remember the cosine is going to be this length right here of my 30, 60, 90 triangle. Remember this is actually the 60 degrees right here. I just wrote it up here. You'll see in the unit circle how we have that written out. But we did our 60 degree, which is here, right? And I have the 60 written right here. We calculate that that's going to be 1/2. And you can calculate cosine of 60 degrees in your calculator. That's an easy one to see. That's going to be 1/2. Again, well, let's look at it in the calculator again. Because the unit circle, all we need to know is the calculations of those, okay? So here we go. Cosine of 60 is going to be 0.5, which is 1/2. Now, remember, so this is going to be a weird concept for you. Cosine is the to get to this point, I got to go 1/2 over, and then I got to go up. Cosine of this point right here, 45 degrees, I got to go square root of 2 over 2 over, and then go up. So how much do I go over? Now, to get to this point right here, if my radius is 1, how far over do I have to go, right? This is 1, this is square root of 3 over 2, this is square root of 2 over 2, this is 1/2. How far over do I have to go up to this point? Well, I actually go 0 degrees, or 0, I just go 0, not degrees. I go 0 to get here. So cosine of 9, that's 0. And again, this is, you can see how this is 90 degrees? And if you're saying, Sensei, I don't get it, I can't visually see it. Well, just take it in your calculator. I rotate 90 degrees. Let's figure out what's the cosine of 90 degrees. Whoops. What is the cosine of 90 degrees? 0. Okay, so at this point, we're going to say 0. 90 degrees, 0. Now, if you notice on my table, I'm not going to do these little ones, these points here. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Don't worry about those. In order to graph it, to keep it really simple, we just want to plot the 90 degree increments. And I'll show you what I mean by that in just a second. So I only want to do 90. And now what if I go down here, 180? Remember my cosine is left and right. So now over here, to get to this point, if this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis, my radius is 1. How far to the left am I going at 180 degrees? I'm going whoop, 180 degrees. How far am I going to the left if my radius is 1? See if you can figure that out. And yes, the answer is I'm going over 1 unit. However, this is actually going to be in the negative direction because it's the x in the negative direction. Cosine of 180 degrees is going to be -1. Now, if you don't believe me, let's put in our calculator and hit cosine of 180 degrees. What do we get? We get -1. Okay? Then if we go after another 90 degrees, what's 180 plus 90? Well, we go 270 degrees. Now look at this. How far left and right am I going to get to this 270 degrees? Left and right. Not down, but how far left and right? We're right in the middle, so we're actually at 0. Okay, I'm going left and right 0 to get to that point right there. So actually 270 degrees is going to be 0. Sensei, I can't see that. I'm totally confused. Well, let's cosine 270 degrees. Cosine 270, what do we get? 0. So just plot the 0, right? You just plug it in and plot. We know it's 0. So I went 270. How about I went all the way here is 270 degrees. How if I go all the way around? How many degrees is that? How many degrees? If I go all the way around? Yes, 360. So once I get 360, I'm right here on my circle. How far over am I? Yes, I'm over 1. And again, if you don't believe me, we'll say cosine of 360. What is that? That is equal to 1. Okay, so, and then as we keep going, that's 1. And the next one is 450. That means another 90 degrees. So I go up here. Whoop. How far left and right am I? Well, I'm at, guess what? 0 again. If you don't understand that, do cosine of 450. Cosine of 450, what do I get? 0. Okay? And then I go, right, because that's 450. I go 360 plus another 90 is 450. Plus another 90 is 540 degrees. How far am I left and right to get to this point here? -1. And if you don't believe me, you can go ahead and hit cosine of 540. What do we get? We're at -1 again, okay? And then we go all the way here. I go all the way around here again, right? We go 360, then 450, then 540. Then another 90 is 630. Well, guess what? Left and right. To get to this point right here, how far left and right do I need to go? Well, you're right in the middle, so you're at 0 again. So at 630, we're at 0. Again, if you don't believe me in the calculator, we say cosine of 630. What do we get? We're at 0. Okay, and then finally, go around twice is 720 degrees. 360 plus 90 is 450. Plus 90 is 540, plus 90 is 630, 720 degrees. How far over are we? To get to this point, we got to go +1. So we hit 720, +1. If you don't believe me, do cosine of 720, and we get 1. But sensei, I know what you're saying. What about 0? Well, what do you think the cosine of 0 is? I am right here. Sorry. We didn't get cosine of 0 degrees. Can you predict what the cosine of 0 degrees would be if I am right here, going left and right? How far left or right do I have to go? Yes, it's actually 1. And hit cosine. Let's hit cosine of 0, and we get 1. Can you see that 1 there? We get 1. So cosine of 0 is 1. So let's go back there and put our 1. Now we have all our information to graph our function. So go ahead and make sure you have that written out. So I'm going to go to the graph in just a second. We are going to, when we graph, we are going to ignore these. Ignore. Let's not graph those because I don't want to graph. What the heck is square root of 3 over 2, root 2 over 2? 1/2 we can kind of do. We kind of make that, but I don't know what that number is. Let's just graph our 1s and 0s and -1s. Okay? All right, so here's your graph. Go ahead and copy that graph down. And let's go ahead and graph it. Now, normally we're going to do this in radians, but since we don't know radians yet, we're doing this in degrees. Notice I did this in multiples of 90 degrees. 90, 180, 270, 360, 450, 540, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So go ahead and copy that. I skipped the 90. You can put the 90 in there if you want. I just ran out of room. So what is cosine? This is cosine of x. I'll go back and forth. What is cosine of 0 degrees? Well, it is 1. So at x, this is saying when x equals 0, cosine of x, or my y, equals 1. So when x equals 0, cosine of x equals 1. Now let's do 90 degrees next. I'm going to skip these. Let's do 90 degrees. 90. When x equals 90 degrees, what's my cosine of x? 0. So when x equals 90 degrees, y is 0. When x equals 180 degrees, what's my cosine of x, or what's my y? Negative 1. So at 180 degrees, I got to go down negative 1. What about 270? When x is 270, cosine of 270 is 0. So guess what? 270, I go back up here. What about 360 degrees? Well, 360 degrees, I go back up to 1. At 450 degrees, what do I got? I go back down to 0. Are you starting to see a pattern? At 540 degrees, I go down to negative 1. At 630 degrees, I go back at 0. And at 720, I go up at 1. So here we go. Here's what our cosine of x looks like. Now listen, see how it rounds at the corners. And we're going to go back down again. And that's what your cosine of x will look like. Okay? So, take a look. There's all my answers. To represent the situation, we have this unit circle, which I did here. Did the unit circle here. Okay, you can print that up. We did the table. We did the equation, and we did the graph. So that's it, guys. That's how you graph y equals cosine of x. I think it's a little bit more challenging than y equals sine of x because you're looking at the x-axis rather than how far up and down it is. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful. And I'm still working on those magic tricks. So if you're ever interested, actually I'm not going to tell you how to do it because it's magic. So I just don't want you to know. All right. So anyway, I hope everything's going well. And this is Sensei signing off. Y equals cosine of x. Go ahead and graph it. All right. Gah! See you guys.